Hey everyone, I'm Kirsty, aka KBeth Bookish. I hope you're good. And on today's video, we're going to be looking at book recommendations for your favourite Genshin Impact characters. I've seen a few of these types of videos floating around. Eric from Break Even Books has done I think he did more recommendations for the characters from Bridgerton rather than book recommendations for you based on the characters. But there are various ones of these floating around where people choose a show or a game or whatever and then they recommend books based on the characters. So I thought I would do one based off of one of my current obsessions, which is the video game Genshin Impact. And I've sunk way too many hours into this video game, just saying. But this is a great one because there are so many characters. I think there's now something like 40 playable characters. No, not that many, surely. There are a lot. And I don't yet own all of them. So obviously I'm not going to go through all of them. In fact, there's a couple of them that are on this list that I have not yet owned. But I've picked characters that either are my personal favourites, I know their backstories really well because of various things in the game, or are just ones that even though I don't own, I really like them and could quite easily come up with a book suggestion. So some of these are matched to the character and I found a book where it has a similar character. Some of these are from their backstory, so it has similar themes and ideas. And we're kickstarting with my personal favourite. I love this character so much. I think he's so sweet and he does not deserve the crap that happens to him, and that is Bennett. I love Benny, he's so cute. I love him. So the book I've chosen for Bennett is The Extraordinaries by TJ Klune, because I think Bennett and Nick are the same person. Nick has ADHD and Bennett displays a lot of ADHD traits. I'm not saying he has it, I'm just saying I resonate with Bennett quite a lot. And both of these characters have like this thing where they just seem to always have bad luck, and they've always got really good intentions, but unfortunately they just also have really bad luck. They're both quite clumsy, they both have people that reluctantly work with them, although sometimes they don't want to work with them. I just think the two of them have a really similar vibe, and I think the energy that they've both got is very similar, where they really want to do well but get really disheartened because they know that it's inevitably going to go wrong. So I think that's a pretty good match for Bennett. Next up we have another one that I absolutely love and he needs to be protected, and that is Kazuma. And he's a very kind of gentle soul. He had to flee Inazuma, but he is a story gatherer. He loves poetry and he loves learning about folk tales, and he loves learning about different worlds and exploring and travelling different worlds. And I think he would fit the audiobook that I only started last night but I'm already loving, and that is Botanical Folk Tales of Britain and Ireland. And I think he would really enjoy this book. And I think if you like Kazuma and you vibe with Kazuma and you vibe with this idea of learning about tales and stories from all around the world, I think you would enjoy this, because this gathers a load of folk tales around various plants. So one of the stories was around apple trees, another one was around holly bushes, another one was on sphagnum moss. And I think it matches Kazuma very well in that it's that idea of collecting various stories and folk tales. And I think that matches the vibe of Kazuma really well. Next up, I've gone with Childe, or aka Tartaglia, and I have chosen Six of Crows because he gives me such Jesper vibes. There's just something about him. He's got that kind of like cheeky, boyish charm about him, but he's also not afraid to do the dirty work, and he's got hidden complexities that he keeps trapped behind this wall of like nonchalance and childishness and like cheek, and charm. And they both are sort of sharpshooters. Jesper obviously uses guns. Childe uses a bow and arrow. But I don't know, they just have very similar energies, very similar vibes. So I think if you like Childe, you will really like Jesper in Six of Crows. And I think you'll enjoy the vibe of Six of Crows. Then I've gone with Outrider Amber because say what you want about her being an absolutely useless character for gameplay, which she is, I love her. I love her energy, and she actually has quite the sad backstory. Her grandfather was the founder of the Outrider Regiment of the Knights of Favonius, and over time he destroyed their reputation, and by the time Amber took over, nobody likes the Outriders, nobody trusts them, they're seen as outcasts, and she is determined to now regain the reputation and regain the glory and honour that once came with the title of being an Outrider. And I think that resonated so well with Falkio in Traitor's Blade in the Greatcoat series. Even though this is more adult and more political based, that idea of the Greatcoats have been dishonoured, they have lost their reputation and have basically been relegated to being called Tattercloaks. And yeah, I think that really resonates really well with Amber, and I think if you find that really interesting, the idea of rebuilding a reputation that's been broken, then I think you'll get on really well with the Greatcoat series. Next up, I chose Klee. And for Klee, I had no other idea in my brain than Nimona. And this is because Klee she is obviously a child, so she's very childlike, she's very innocent, very sweet, very naive, but she is also very dangerous and often does things without really thinking about how it's going to impact other people. And I feel like Nimona has that same sort of chaotic vibe. Nimona herself is also quite childlike in the way she approaches things. She's quite energetic and enthusiastic about what she does, and Klee is also, and both of them don't really stop to think about the repercussions of their actions. The only difference is Nimona doesn't really care, whereas Klee, when you point it out, she does show some remorse and is like, oh no, I shouldn't have done that. But I think the pair of them have very, very similar energy, so if you really like Klee as a character, I think you will love Nimona. Next up we have Lisa, who is the electro mage, and you meet her quite early on. She loves flirting, she runs the library, she's very knowledgeable, loves books, she's also a witch and deals with magic, and she has sort of broken away from the witches' coven to do her own thing, and I feel like she would be very invested in stories around feminism and witches and magic. So I have picked the Once and Future Witches as a recommendation if you like her as a character, because in this you've got witches who are all breaking the moulds, they're all doing different things. It's got the suffragette movement in here, and it also links to that librarian aspect of Lisa, and it deals with play on words, it deals with Grimm's fairy tales, and it has really lovely metaphors within the book, and I think this is a book that she would love, but also I think if you love her as a character, you would appreciate a lot of elements in this book because they're very similar to things that she's gone through. Next up we have Yaimiko, and I could not choose any other book than Wicked Fox by Kat Cho. And honestly, I've not read the second book yet, but I did read and enjoy the first book. It follows the story of a nine-tailed fox, the Gummiho, and the stories are very similar and the lore are very similar, and even the aesthetic with the pink and the everything and the sakura blossoms, I think it all just goes really well together. So I think Yaimiko definitely fits the story that goes with Wicked Fox, and certainly the lore around the nine-tailed fox demon. We then have the bard Venti, who again is someone I really love. He's got kind of like a sad backstory. I think he's dealt with a lot of depression, a lot of feelings of self-doubt, and a lot of feelings of being inadequate. He's the weakest of the seven gods. He's kind of seen as being a bit useless quite a lot of the time. And I think he's just had a lot of his life where he's just felt really low, really depressed, and like he's not good enough for everything. And so I decided the perfect fit for him would be Enough by Kevin Dummon. I read it this month and it eliminated me. And this is a book written in verse, which again I think fits, being as he is a bard and he does do poetry and songs. So I think he would appreciate this. And this deals with depression. It deals with not feeling like you're good enough for people and feeling inadequate. It also has an element in this book of like family separation and rejection and things, which I don't think applies to Venti, but the majority of the themes in this book I definitely do think apply to Venti. Next up is Hu Tao, and for this I could only think of Cemetery Boys, because you've got the idea of spirits and death and celebration of ancestors, and Hu Tao deals with funeral rites and deals with these kind of celebrations and these kind of ceremonies. And I just feel like the vibes from Hu Tao match very well with Cemetery Boys, especially dealing with like the spirits and the I can't remember the actual celebration. But like the Day of the Dead, Night of the Dead celebrations, I think they're just a really, really good match. And so again, if you've played the game and you know the character and you've read Cemetery Boys, I really hope you agree with me on this one, but I think that they're a really good match for each other. And then I've only got two more. The first one is Noelle. I love Noelle. She's still one of my mains that I play. And I picked Black Butler for her. Now this is one of the ones where you might be thinking, where is she coming from with this? But let me explain. Noelle, when you read her lore and her backstory, she does everything. Like, she's not just a maid, she is a maid, and she is one hell of a maid. And it reminded me of Sebastian, because he's one hell of a butler. And it's just like, she does things like to protect people, and she will go anywhere for anyone. And I just feel like some of the things that she's done match with Sebastian really, really well. Obviously there's the storyline where Sebastian is a demon and she is not. She is pure and whole and lovely. But I just thought that idea of the maid who has extra abilities and goes out and fights and does all these extra quests just lined up beautifully with Sebastian. So I'm going to stick with that one and say Black Butler and Noelle. And then the final one, ending on a little bit of tragedy, I've chosen Shenhe, and I really did struggle with this because I originally was looking at books that dealt with exorcism. Then I looked at books where it was like the parents betrayed their child, because with Shenhe, after her mother died, her father tried to sacrifice her to a god in order to bring her mother back to life. Like, she represses a lot of her anger and her hatred and her abilities, and so she goes through a lot of trauma, and she does suffer with a little bit of PTSD, but then she has since been taken on by the Cloud Retainer, who is trying to help her manage all of that. And I felt vibe-wise, even though I couldn't find any sort of stories that had a similar storyline to that, and if anyone does know any storylines similar, please do let me know. But I thought Girls of Paper and Fire kind of matched that element of the trauma, because Ren goes through this trauma. She's dragged away from her family, everything's upended, her mother's died, she goes through this really traumatic experience in the first book, and then the rest of the series has been the follow-on from that and is in like the recovery stage and trying to recuperate her sense of self and well-being, but also it deals with the anger and knowing that she's got this ability to do these things but doesn't want to. And I just feel like there's very similar emotions, very similar vibes between Shenhe's backstory and what happens within Girls of Paper and Fire. Even though Shenhe's trauma came from a different place, I just feel they would have very similar emotions and processings to each other. So that's why I recommend Girls of Paper and Fire if you like Shenhe and liked her backstory, but thought it was a really powerful backstory. I do have more written down, so I will do this as a multi-part. Do you also play in Genshin Impact? Let me know your dream team and your current team below, as well as if you agree with my recommendations. And yeah, until next time, I hope you're good, I hope you're staying safe, and I'll see you on the next video.